this here, if that's
Oh,
okay.
that's great. Perfect. Amazing. Cool. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Nice to see you. How's the day been so far?
Thank God.
Cool, nice. And
How's your day been?
thank God, it's been good. Good fun. And exciting to learn some of this stuff together. So I am somewhat of a rebellious character. Some people may be aware of this already. My wife is definitely aware of this issue. And to the extent that I will often rebel even against myself. Meaning to say that, I'll as soon as I find myself comfortable somewhere, I'll often end up feeling there must be more, there must be something different, there must be different ways to do things. So I'll often end up relating to things differently, the same thing differently over the course of time. And one of those things, for me, has been Leila Seder, Pesach in general, and specifically the Seder night. So Seder night started off for me as a tradition. That was like the first mode of interaction with Seder night was tradition, and every single year we did the same songs, and we ate the same foods, and me and my brother dressed up for the plagues, and we used to kind of like have little toys, a lot of which were definitely matzah. Now come to think about it. Oh, thank you, Shkot. And that was what we did every year, and it was fun. And then the next stage of evolution was that the Seder is not something which is just about tradition, it's something which is about learning, which is about learning more. And you think, a night of learning, kol hamarbe, harizim mashubach, they're going in more, and you're asking questions and thinking. And so this was something I had for quite a while. But I more recently realized that that is not necessarily the main thing about Seder nights. The learning as such is not necessarily the main thing. Because if you take a look at our first source over here, which is from the Mishnah in Pesachim, but we do actually quote it in the Haggadah itself, we say as follows, B'chol dor v'dor, chayav adam lirot et atzmo ki'ilu hu yatsa mimitzrayim. In every single generation, every individual, we are obligated to view ourselves as if we are the ones leaving Egypt. Now, that doesn't sound to me like an intellectual exercise. That sounds to me like an experience. Meaning, we're not commemorating something which happened in the past and learning about esoteric, abstract ideas. We're actually meant to be experiencing something in the present. So perhaps it's not just that we are viewing ourselves as if, and it's some kind of game that it's as if we were the ones who were leaving Egypt, but perhaps we are actually leaving Egypt right now. Perhaps there is, to some extent, we are finding ourselves in something called avdut, slavery, and we are actually moving on this very night to something else called chirut. In fact, that's something we say in the Haggadah, in the Halach Ma'anya, in that kind of introduction to the Maggid section. We say Hashta Avdei. This year we are slaves. We say now Shana Haba B'nei Chorin, and next year we're going to be free. So the slavery business is not really about past tense. That's about a state that we are in now, which we're hoping to move through, to graduate from and elevate ourselves from during the course of the Seder itself to that higher level called chirut, called freedom, whatever indeed that is. And with that, we could... Now, I will also say that might sound like a bit of an ask, right, to kind of completely transform our essence on that night. And there are people who tap into this, but in honesty, they do it in unreachable ways. Like, for example, there's a Haggadah which came out. I don't know if it was this year. I only saw it this year. But maybe I won't give it away. Yeah, whatever. It was something called, I don't mean to bash this, it's obviously a good thing, but it was something called, I think, the Attachment Haggadah, and it was talking about, it's a very good thing, but it was about like one's relationship to Hashem vis-a-vis attachment theory and psychology, and how, going through that, you can develop one's attachment into like a healthy one with Hashem. It's through the Seder. So it's very good, but the honest truth is you're never going to manage that. Right, meaning for over the course of life, definitely agree. Definitely, we should be doing things like this. But it's one night. It's very busy. You could be tired. You could have kids screaming. As you were noting from previous years. You have, if you're going to try and tackle transformation, it has to be in a manageable way. So, is there a way that we can have both? So the Maharal charts a course for us in the way that which we can have both. And just check that second source over here in the first box, the second source, from Gevurah Teshem. The bulk of the sources here are from the Maharal, who's just completely changed my life in many ways, and especially to do with understanding Pesach in general and the Seder in particular. And this is in many ways the key game changer for the rest of our lives. This is what he says. We were commanded to eat lechem oni, this bread of poverty, which is matzah, on the night of the Exodus. And we'll talk a bit more about what poverty has to do with Exodus and things like that shortly. But really, with this, he's coming to answer a fundamental question. Is that a lot of people think that the matzah, we ate the matzah. This is what we grew up, back to the tradition, right? What did we grow up being taught? That we ate the matzah because we never had time to bake anything else, and so, etc., etc. However, we were commanded many days before that on that night you're going to eat matzah. And we ate the matzah while we were still in Egypt, before we'd left. We eat the matzah, do the whole first Pesach Seder, then at midnight, makot b'chorot, and then the Exodus process begins. So why? Okay, so now after all that, it's not about commemorating anything. Also, you can't commemorate the thing before it's happened, right? So it's happening right now. So why are we eating matzah then? And that's something which we'll translate even to today. He explains, and he says, "Va'az yiknu ha'geula." He explains the idea of matzah, which we'll go into shortly, and says, and then they will acquire the geula. Meaning, matzah is not descriptive of geula; it is prescriptive. It is creative. The matzah, and we'll see some of the other mitzvahs of the night, are not something which commemorate a process in the past. They're something which actually bring about a process in the present. That is the process which, through consuming and integrating the matzah into themselves, that was something which they experienced that very first Pesach. And through those same mitzvot, in subsequent years, we are able to actually experience our own geula, to transform ourselves through the mitzvahs of the night. Now, this is much more doable because you're going to do the mitzvahs of the night. We'll see Menucha, she did her session yet? Menucha did one? She's going to do one on the practicalities, right? So everyone's going to come away just to know the basics, what you do. I don't know if she's going to bring it in, but I sent her that you don't necessarily have to eat as much matzah as they tell you that you should eat. You know, my wife's family, they like to be machmir on the shiurim, right? So they like to have as much wine as possible, as much matzah as possible. But you know, if it's difficult, you can get away. You can fulfill the mitzvah eating not as much. But you'll eat some matzah on that night for sure. I'm confident you guys will be able to drink 4 cups of wine or grape juice or whatever it is that you need, and you'll have had enough time from Purim to be able to do that again, and etc. With those things, those are things that you'll do, and all you need to do is just add a kavanah. Those physical acts plus the kavanah is going to bring about a personal geula, basically. And that's something which we can do. And the idea is, and the truth is, it'll work to some extent even without your kavanah, which is sometimes where people are standing, right? Like that's sometimes the reality is it's a hard time, people are tired, different things. So even if you don't add in any kavanah, the mitzvahs are often like a machine, the way that Nefesh Chaim kind of describes it. It's like a machine which you press the buttons. It doesn't really matter if you know how it works. It works. So it does create something in the world. It does create something in yourself. However, what you're able to do when you add kavanah is that you supercharge the effect of your mitzvahs. Meaning the act of the mitzvah is like the body of the mitzvah, and the intention, your mindset at the time of the mitzvah, is like the soul of the mitzvah. So if you do the mitzvah without anything in mind, so you have the body of the mitzvah, you still have something. And so something will be created, something will happen. What you're able to do when you add in a kavanah, a bit of an understanding of what's going on at the time, and to have that experience of what's going on, basically what you're able to do is like add firepower to your mitzvah and give fuel, give life behind the mitzvah, and there's really no limits as to the heights that you can reach and the difference that you can make in the world and for yourself, basically with this formula. So I think this was one of the things I liked about this. It's something which is, on the one hand, is a very big aim, but it's also something which is very achievable. And it's achievable to the extent that any of us will be able to on the night, and we'll do the acts, and we'll add in whatever kavanas that we can, and with that we'll be totally maximizing our power to completely change as people on that night. So this is what I wanted to try and give us some tools to do today. So before firing into some of the mitzvahs of the night, there's more, but we're just focusing on the main ones. Some of the mitzvahs of the night and some of the things that we can have in mind about transformations which are taking place to actually enable those transformations. So any kind of points or things which people want to bring up at that stage. Okay, we're too early in the Yom Yun. Don't worry, it's better than having the slot at the end of the second day of learning about Pesach for 2 whole days. So there you go. But okay, so without further ado, in that case, let's get into it. So really the 3 key mitzvot of the night, as such, are Pesach, matzah, maror. Right? Now the truth is there are of course more mitzvot, of course. The main other one which I really wanted to talk about, I just don't know if we'll have time. If we have time, we'll talk about it. But it's the 4 cups, right? But in principle, the Pesach, matzah, maror are all d'oraita, meaning Pesach, eating the Pesach sacrifice, and the matzah, eating the matzah obviously, and eating the maror, they're all mitzvot from the Torah. It happens to be that today, meaning today, so matzah is the only one of those which is d'oraita, which is on a Torah level. The matzah never changed. The Pesach sacrifice has changed. That's not something today we have, but I did want to bring it to you because it could be, who knows, there's time between now and then. Not particularly today, but there's time between now and then, so you might need to know the kavanah. Have you been learning about, I think maybe Rav Simi taught you something about this before. You need to know, get ready. Whenever this comes, you need to be ready for it. It could happen whenever it's going to happen, whichever year it's going to happen. It could happen the day before Pesach. So you need to get ready to have the right kavanas for eating Korban Pesach. And maror technically today is Derabanan. But again, at some point in the Gula, it'll of course be d'oraita. It'll be on the Torah level. And even then, rabbinic mitzvahs are also important. If you celebrate Hanukkah, right? So then that means you think rabbinic mitzvahs are important. And if you don't eat chicken and milk together, that means you also hold rabbinic mitzvahs. So it doesn't matter just because they're rabbinic mitzvahs, not saying they're less, but just so we have clarity in terms of what we're doing. My dream is if we get time, we could talk a bit about the 4 cups, but I think that's already very ambitious. So we'll think about that. We can add that as a postscript if possible. Okay, so with that, so let's talk about Pesach. So the Korban Pesach, the Pesach sacrifice. So which kind of animal is a Pesach sacrifice? Anyone? It's a lamb, yeah, okay, nice. Did anyone else say sheep? Okay, I'm the only one who just has no subtlety. I just go, sheep, that's close enough. Okay, but you're right, specifically a lamb. It's the species of sheep, but a lamb in its life stage, that is certainly true. And there are all kinds of interesting halachas. Anyone know any other halachot about how you're meant to eat the Korban Pesach, how you're not meant to eat it? Roasted, yeah, good, yeah. Which, even though it was different in the times of Gemara, so now we have a practice to specifically not have roasted meat on the night of Pesach, unless someone thinks that we're trying to bring the sacrifice. But every year someone tries to bring the sacrifice, right? There's always someone. There's always someone who tries to do it. So it's quite funny. I was at a house once for Pesach, and the person was so excited about cooking. She said, "Oh, it's brilliant! I've made for Pesach. We've made on the night, right? We've made a beautiful roast." And I was like, "Oh no, gosh, we're going to do it." But I think it technically wasn't this issue because it was people say a roast, but it's in liquid in the oven. So I think that technically doesn't count. So that was fine. This dish that the matriarch of the house was so proud of, we were able to eat that. But that's going to be, that's what was, and what's going to be is a roast lamb with many other details. There's many other details about it, how you're meant to eat it. It's not meant to have any broken bones. All different kinds. You're meant to eat it in one house. You're not meant to kind of split it up between multiple houses. A few different things. So let's see what that's about. Elizabeth, yeah, what were you thinking?
Yeah, I was gonna add you also in order to you have to have bread.
Yes, that's also true. Yeah. So you have to have a certain preparation. It's interesting. It is a whole thing, but even that's one of the only two positive mitzvot that you get that you get cut off for not having is doing a brit milah. If you're a man, meant to do brit milah. If you don't do a brit milah, you get it's called karet, and then bringing the Korban Pesach. If you don't bring the Korban Pesach, so generally karet is only for negative things, but there's two. These things are connected, as Elizabeth is saying. Sorry, I hope I'm not ruining this recording over here. Okay, so let's find out a little bit about what the Korban Pesach is about, and and also what some of the halachot are about. So it says, Zot ha'avodah, hi avodah me'uma yechida, lemi shehu echad. This is an avodah, service. The korbanot are always called avodah, service. That is one which is coming from the Uma Yechida, the singular nation, Lemi Shehu Echad, for the one who is one, i.e. for God. And we'll see this idea of Echad, of oneness, is something which is completely prevalent in all of the halachot of the Korban Pesach. It says, V'zeu etzem a-korban hazeh. This is the essence of this sacrifice. Lekach haya kol ha'avodah azot, be'inyan achdut. Every single thing in this korban, wherever you look, about the halachot, many halachot of the Korban Pesach, wherever you look, you'll find the idea of achdut, of oneness, of unity being expressed. It says, for example, ki haya mitzvata korban le'echol ato al kra'av va'al kirbo. It's to take all of the parts of the animal and eat them all together. She'ein ra'oi sheyeh korban hazeh mechulak. Because we don't want this korban to be split up in any way. Because then that would be something which would create some element of division. And the Korban Pesach is all about achdut, it's all about unity. And then he goes into the other things in terms of being eaten also in one house. If one family, if there's only a few people in one family and they're not going to finish the whole thing, so they bring other people in. It's called a chabura, actually. That's a group of people who eat the Korban Pesach together. But they all eat it in one house. You can't take it, there's no takeaway bags for a Korban Pesach, right? And so in the oneness in terms of the house and in terms of the way that it's eaten, no broken bones because you don't want any division. So he goes in a lot of depth in terms of how every element of the Korban Pesach is a manifestation of achdut. So in that sense, when we are to consume the Korban Pesach, we are internalizing and transforming ourselves vis-a-vis our relationship to achdut. So this is a question that we can ask ourselves. This is not a historical issue at all. It's a very, very current issue. Is how are we doing on achdut? How are we doing on unity? Do we have growth that we could have in that domain? Now, I will say that being part of the, being Darchei Noamnik, right? That you guys have a head start. It's definitely doing a lot. In terms of trying to make sure that we're feeling one with other Jews and feeling together and appreciating the diversity without kind of splitting ourselves off into different sides. So it's definitely a good start. But usually the problem is, achdut usually falls down where you say, yeah, I feel one with all Jews apart from that one. Apart from that one because he's this and she's that. Right? So we often have limitations to the levels that we've reached in achdut. I'll give you an unbelievable thing which happened to me once. Has anyone ever heard of Rabbi Hirschfeld, Rabbi Yitzchak Hirschfeld? So he was So he was he's the emeritus Rosh Hashiva of Chappelle's. So I was in Chappelle's back in the day. So when I was in Chappelle's, I had a friend who had gone to a less tolerant kind of yeshiva, similar kind of like age and stage. He was a little bit earlier in his journey than me as well, which was relevant to the story, and I'd met up with him. We'd both come to Israel. I met up with him, and I was a little bit concerned about the possible extremism of his life path within Judaism, religious Judaism. Something I felt was a little extreme, and so I spoke to Rav Hirschfeld about it, and I thought I said, what do you think? What should I say to him? You want to kind of I don't want him to get on the wrong path, whatever, but anyway, so I asked, Rav Hirschfeld, and Rav Hirschfeld, even though he's a very, very pious man himself, but he's also a fan of moderation. He was also one of the founders of the whole thing, so also a fan of this kind of moderation and things like that. And he looked and he has this thinking face, this thing, and he said, you also have to be tolerant of intolerant people. So how many of us are ready to be tolerant of intolerant people? So this one, and he was like this. I saw him like this with people. Rav Hirsch, he is like this. He's still around, just not the Rosh Hashiva. So that so you see when you see people like that, wow, there are still levels that I can rise to in achdut, and so this is something through the mitzvah of the night. Korban Pesach may it be manifest, obviously soon, that through consuming the Korban Pesach, we're bringing into ourselves this idea of achdut, and we'll wake up the next day as completely different quality of achdut-seeking Jews. So that's the one thing that one can have in mind, which can completely transform them as a person. through that mitzvah. So that's mitzvah number 1. Okay, so any points before going on to matzah, mitzvah number 2? Okay, so matzah is pretty unbelievable. And one of the things that we've said already has already been quoted is the idea of matzah being lechem oni, bread of poverty. So to some extent, to the extent that this is a little bit of a misleading line, right? Because so if I was to ask you, what does matzah represent? Just a simple answer. Why are we eating matzah? What does matzah represent? Just a simple answer. Anyone would venture one? Yeah. Humility. Okay, good. I was already called that like a complex, meaning like a sophisticated answer. But I think that is also going to come into this. Yeah.
It's like the bread of like poor people.
Yeah. So right, exactly. So the poverty you attach, it's called lechem oni, poor, and the typical thing which people would do is attach that therefore to the slavery. We're talking about slavery, at least partially, on Seder night, and they would attach it to that. It's not just people who don't know stuff. Some Rishonim do this. I think the Ramban says that matzah was what the Egyptians fed us in Egypt. So that and for some reason, I don't know if it's true, it would work or not, but it was like because it was slow to digest, so they didn't have to feed us as much. So there's Rishonim who say this. The Maharal, you'll see, is going to take a completely different approach, and to view matzah as part of the chirut, the freedom, as opposed to the slavery. But I think that's the point. So Amelia, what were you wanting to say?
I was going to say people also call it the bread of affliction.
Bread of affliction, yeah. So I think it's also a fair translation of oni, because the word inui, that's the word inui, which is the same ayin nun. That also means to afflict. That's what they say on Yom Kippur. Is there's 5 mitzvahs of inui, is to not eat and not drink, and so the idea of like afflicting definitely is a translation of that. So a lot of people have the impression that matzah is like a negative thing in a certain way. But so with that, let's take a look at the Maharal, who's going to completely turn things on their head. It says, "Matzah nikra lechem oni, hefech matzah ashira." So we're going to have to deal with this issue, by the way. So then why use all these negative words? Talk about something which apparently is the most positive thing ever. So first we need to understand what is poor, what's rich. So oni is the opposite of matzah ashira, of what would be called rich matzah. What's matzah ashira, anyone? Yeah. So fruit juice or sweet things, or so you can have, and they sell this. This is especially Sephardim have the minhag to eat this, not for Leila Seder, but like it's kosher Pesach, but it's just not matzah, right? So they have, it's called matzah shira. That's what it's called in halacha. So what's the difference between this and so it's ani and ashira, poor and rich bread or rich matzah. She'kasher yesh ba shemed udavash, if there's oil or honey in it, nikreit ashira, that's called rich. Ki adavar hazeh ma'asher lechem, because that enriches the bread. It makes it a more interesting bread. It makes it have more components to it. V'zeh ki ani she'ein lo ela atzmo, ve'ein lo mamon rak atzmo. That what's therefore someone who's poor, as a poor person, we know a poor person is someone who doesn't have money. So what do they have? They have themselves. So that is the kind of the first basic analysis, is that something which is rich has lots of kind of like external extra elements to them. Someone who's poor just has themselves. Let's see, and it says ki ha'aniut ba'atzmo hora al ha'geula, and so that's going to be our bridge to understanding how poverty, bread of poverty, is going to relate ultimately to geula, to redemption and freedom. She'ein inyan ha'geula rak sheyotze ve'ein lo shum tziruf el zulato. The idea of geula, of redemption, means that you leave and you disconnect from other things. In other words, independence. The idea of geula is independence. Happens to be, it's quite an interesting thing, that there's this mitzvah to walk in the ways of God, Valachta b'drachav, that we should follow. There's a mitzvah to do. There's like specific mitzvahs to do specific things, and there's a general thing of being godly, walking in the ways of Hashem. So, what's the main way that you do that? What is the main characteristic of Hashem that one should try and emulate. So Rav Hutner said the main characteristic of Hashem that we should be trying to emulate, the highest of the high, is independence. Because Hashem he's Eino Tolui Ba'acher, he doesn't need anything else, but Kol Tolui Bo, and everything needs him. He's not dependent on anything. He's completely independent. He stands, so to speak, on his own 2 feet, so to speak. And that's Geula. The Geula is your ability to stand, not to be a subject to others, not to have connections which you're dependent upon, but to be able to have that independence and stand on your own 2 feet. So that's really Geula. Yeah. What do you think of that?
I just think I don't like the example between like rich versus poor.
Yeah.
Because I feel like we're trying to analyze the poor, but in reality both could like stand themselves up.
Correct. Or not for that matter. Meaning you can. So when you press play. So this is always a Maharal. It's very conceptual to start with. So in concepts, this is what we have. If you have superficial connections, then you have things to depend upon. If you have nothing to connect to, then all you have is yourself. So in the concept, that's the way it is. When we press play and put it in practice, what this means is in your mind. It is in your mindset, because as you're saying, we're not necessarily glamorizing poverty. We daven for parnasa. It's not necessarily a goal. Happens to be there are certain positive things which are said in the Gemara about poverty, but in general, it's for sure not the main thing that you search for. The main thing is to be well. If you daven for parnasa, you want to be able. You need it in order to do all kinds of things. You need money to be able to do mitzvahs. You're about to need a lot of money to be able to do Pesach. As my wife said, actually, so you think the lechem ani, you think it's because after you did all the Pesach shopping, then that's why it's bread of poverty. It's because after. But the Maharal says a little bit differently. He says before, meaning that it's the idea of the bread itself. So how can this Hadar's question is going to bring us into how is it going to be able to relate to us? So the question is, how independent are we, for example, in our minds? How independent-minded are we? How much do we think things because that's what people think? How much do we take things as a given because that's the way? So that's called dependence. That's called getting your mind from what the connections that you have. How much, but the way that it's meant to be is you're meant to be independent-minded. You're meant to be able to think for yourself. And you see, it's so interesting. They find the greatest people, they were always independent-minded. So you have, for example, there was Rav Gifter, Rav Mordechai Gifter, who's a Rosh Yeshiva in Telz, and he was like an unbelievably dynamic person, and it was quite a funny phenomenon that he was like the gigantic Talmid Chacham, but people would often, like the students in yeshiva, would often not go to him for advice because they never knew what he was going to say. And because he viewed every single thing independently. So what do you know? Why do you usually go for advice? You usually go for advice because you know what you want to do, and you try and find someone who's going to tell you to do what you want to do. But you could never predict in advance what he was going to say, because he was going to look at every single situation individually and weigh it up and see what would be the right thing to do in that situation, and he would give you advice accordingly. So that's on the one hand, that's something that people are scared of. But on the other, that's called independence. That's integrating the matzah into your mind, to be independent-minded. So that's something I think that's something which we could all work about. How about this? How about being independent in your sense of self-worth? So a very, very, very normal phenomenon is that we get our sense of self-worth from how people view us, how we're doing in our friendships, in our relationships, even to some extent from our track records. How have I done in life? But one must realize that your self-worth is not from any of those things. It's from you being you. Hashem made you, chelek lelakamimal. He made you with a divine spark inside you, and that's something that no one can ever take away from you, and it's something itself of completely infinite value. So it doesn't matter what people think about you really, because they could never, if only they knew they were able to access the divine spark inside you, they would be all over you. And the same is obviously true about ourselves vis-a-vis others. The same is true about ourselves vis-a-vis ourselves. If we really knew our true inherent value, then then with that we wouldn't be so bothered in terms of what other people are thinking about us, what other people are saying about us. There's another point I wanted to bring in here in terms of independence in that realm. Oh, but yeah, even just in terms of the track record of your life, your value doesn't come from your acts in the past. That's not where your value comes from. Your value comes from who you are. So when people make mistakes, that's how life goes. That's just the reality. But it doesn't stop you being the most valuable thing. How many of us are living on that level, right? So this is something which something which we want to try and gain on Pesach, is to try and gain the independent, the geula through the lechem oni, to be standing by ourselves. Not with the need for the superficial connections in order to make us who we are, in order to make us feel how we need to feel, but to be able to get that from ourselves, because of who we are, because of what Hashem has given us, and will never take away from us. Kim.
So just we shouldn't have connections that we're dependent on. Like just thinking of Kehila, like thinking of having like a community to be a part of.
Yeah.
Like it's very hard to be in a place where there's no community and you are kind of dependent on it.
Yeah.
So just how is that is that
very fair point. Very fair point. Very very fair point. The following thing is, it's really important that you brought this up. The following thing is going to be really important for basically anything we say. We're being a little idealistic. Pesach is unbelievable, and so there's so many opportunities. We want to shoot for the stars, but it is really, really, really important to have a bit of self-awareness and self-knowledge and know where you're holding now. The idea, and this is why you can do Pesach every year and have something to grow about every year, because the idea isn't to necessarily go from 0 to 100. It's not necessarily realistic. But to be more than you are today, that's realistic. So you can't forget about what your needs are, and the best is if you have some self-awareness, then you'll know exactly what would be a fair place to be tomorrow. What would be a reasonable amount of growth to be tomorrow. You can shoot a little bit more than that because Pesach has this unbelievable power, and through the mitzvahs and the kavanas, you can. There is an idea of kind of Pesach means to pass over. There is an idea of being able to kind of leap over levels to some extent, but take that with a grain of salt. Is the normal way that we're meant to grow in life, is stage by stage. So that's actually a whole thing. It's like self-knowledge. That's a whole thing we also need to work on. That's not the shiur, but that's really important. And to the extent that the Gra, the Vilna Gaon, says, he works it out from a pasuk, I think it's in Mishlei, but he basically says, just like acting below your level is called a to'eva, it's an abomination, also acting above your level is also an abomination. You're meant to be who you are, and you're meant to try and grow. That's the thing. So for example, something in terms of that, it's true that there would be a certain ideal. There's some superheroes who do things like this, like some of the Chabad people, like Shlichim, stuff. They are superhuman. The way that they're able to be out there without a kehila in different ways. It's amazing. And they're kind of manifesting this independence. Okay, we're not necessarily holding there, but it's true that we could grow in this way. So to be enriched by our kehila, for sure, and you should. And please don't necessarily go on a shlichut just because of this shiur. Please consult with whoever actually decides. There is someone who's head of shlichut. I don't know what his name is. But he was on a podcast. He was on anyway, the person who obviously used to be the Rebbe who was saying that. So there's someone now who's in charge, head of shlichut operations for Chabad. Anyway, so consult different people before you do things like this. But to have a slightly less dependent relationship, that would be good, because firstly, just as we're saying, it's a value in and of itself. It's the idea of being godly. But also, you never know, what's going to happen. Remember when COVID happened and everyone lost all their social life? I don't know if people, remember that, right? That was a pretty big thing. So it's good, it's worth trying. It's worth to build one's kind of emotional independence in that way to help them in possible different situations where they don't always have those structures. That's a really good point. So this was a little bit about matzah lechem oni. Now there's another element of matzah, which the idea that we were told when we were children that we eat the matzah because we left too quickly and there was no time. So that's not from nowhere. It's not from nowhere. It's from the Tanakh. It's from the Chumash, right? It does say that. So listen, based on what we've said now, so listen to the Maharal's unbelievable interpretation of that line. He says as follows, in this third box down the second section within that box, it says as follows, V'zeu, Perush HaKatuf, Shivat Yamim Tochal Alav Matzot, Lechem Oni, you should eat matzah for 7 days, Ki Bechipatzon Yatzata Mimitzrayim, because you left Egypt in haste, right? That's what it says. But listen to what he does with this. He says, Ki Mashayu Yotzim Bechipazon, the idea of leaving in haste, the idea means Beli Hemshech Zman, without the involvement of time. So that's Morash Yatsu B'Madrega Ub'Ma'ala Elyona. That means that what they did is they left on a higher level. Va'apal Sheba Misham Naaseh Belizman. And then the activity which came from that was something which didn't have time involved. So listen to what the Maharal is doing this. We think Chipazon means they were rushing. Because, I don't know, maybe someone was chasing after them, or it was like a practical issue. It's nothing practical. It was not haste, but it wasn't because of any practical reasons whatsoever. It was because of the idea of time. It's something which ties you to the physical world. It's something which ties you to nature. It's the fourth of the dimensions. It's the most subtle of the dimensions of the physical world, but it's still a dimension of the physical world. What happens when you go up levels in the world? Once you go up to Hashem, so time doesn't apply in the same way. He's Haya V'Hova V'Yeya. He, the past and the present, he's Nimtza Tamid. The past and the present are kind of one with Hashem. So you see, as you rise in spirituality, you kind of become above time to some extent, and that's really what was going on in the idea of leaving quickly. It wasn't leaving quickly because it was fast and not slow. It was leaving quickly because that is as close as you can get to not having any dimension of time. So basically leaving in a spiritual way. So how do you leave in a spiritual way? You don't have time as a factor. So obviously we were practically in the physical world, so what's the closest thing you can have to not having any time is to be quick. But what they were actually doing was being spiritual within the physical world. So that was kind of the thing that they were achieving. And so matzah is also that. So firstly, it just explains like what that line is about and how that will ultimately be something which was l'chatchila. I mean, it was something which we wanted to happen even without us being chased. That was something which was determined a few days before that we were going to eat this matzah. And so when we are ingesting the matzah into ourselves, we are doing that thing about being above time and above physicality. And so now that's something which we can all for sure work on. How's your relationship to money? How's your relationship to materialism? Like, how are we feeling about that? Do we feel completely above materialism? Right? But you could, one step at a time. But you could. Wouldn't our lives be more enjoyable if we weren't feeling meshubad, enslaved by these things? Be it the actual material itself, or the norms that people set, or different things like that. It can be, I'll try not to say too much about it, but there are places where they have such high expectations of people's material standard, of their like standard of living and assets, kind of cars and stuff that they have, that they have very unhealthy financial lives. These people don't have savings because they spend everything to try and keep up with the people next to them. It's very scary. You look at the society from the outside and everything. So, well, it seems like things are going pretty well here. They're actually not going well at all. They're like they're on the edge of a collapse. Hopefully things like that don't happen. But so we see that there is something which is very, very relevant to all of us today, which is how much can we rise above materialism, and that's something which the matzah can help us with. Yeah, Hadar.
Yeah, I was going to add to that, like, people that do that generally, like, idolize, like, money, and I feel like that's like the Satan, like in nowadays, like, that is, like, the devil, like, people idolize, like, oh, this
Yeah.
and that, and, like,
Yeah, I
it
think
shouldn't
so.
be like that.
Yeah.
Don't be a designer back.
But here I will say, but saying all this is an interesting nuance which we could have brought in even with the previous point as well, when you were talking about kind of idolizing poverty and all that, but we do daven for parnasa, so what's going on?
I think it's different though, because if you're Jew and you do have money, you do use that money for the good.
Correct. So, and even more than that,
yeah, you would hope, but you should.
But even more than that is, which that's a part of it is what you use it for. But another part of it is just your relationship to it. What is your relationship to your money? You could be a person who has, has nothing, which is and you want everything. So then, that's not helping anyone. Then you might technically be poor, but you don't have the mila. You don't have the advantage of poverty, which the Maharal talks about, which is that you're independent. You don't have that. And in contrast, you could be rich, but you don't have an unhealthy relationship with your money. You use it to help your family. You use it to help tzedakah. You use it. You put some for savings because it's good for the future. You do certain things perhaps because, let's say, for example, it's quite interesting. Like there were certain figures in history. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was extremely rich. Like not all of Chazal had all of the models, right? Hillel Azaken was extremely poor. He was completely in poverty. But then we can think about Lachamoni and him and independence. But you also have to think about Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, and he was the same thing. The Gemara said he was extremely extremely rich. The Gemara has complete. I don't know if it's exaggerated, but it's extreme things it says about his standard of wealth and things like that. But it also says he never took personal enjoyment. He never took personal hana from any of the stuff. Meaning he had a healthy relationship to it. He had it, and because he was the Nasi as well, so he had to have a certain standing, and so he was displaying it. It wasn't for him; it was make sure that there's certain proper kavod Torah and things like that. That's the way to be rich and have the milo of being poor at the same time, and that's something which you would. This basically.
When you were saying like with the poor and
yeah, exactly.
You could be a rich person, but have that mentality of like.
That's a good word.
Yourself.
Yeah, that's a good word.
You
Mentality.
could be a poor person, but wanting like the money, and that's bad.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's the idea of I think amazing word, mentality. That's exactly what we're talking about over here. And so one has to think about the how much should we be careful? But I'm not trying to take away anyone's parnasa, right? So obviously people. There are good times to go to Pesach hotels, right? There are people, I know people who run Pesach hotels. I've worked as a rabbi in a Pesach hotel once. Don't worry, it wasn't that luxury, so it's okay. And I tried to teach them Maharal, so I was like, so it was good. But one should think about the relationship to materialism and physicality on Pesach, right? That's the time that you're meant to be having a more subtle relationship to physicality, and one should just be careful not to drown themselves in physicality during Pesach. It's the least appropriate thing I could possibly think of. Saying that, there are just because I'm being whatever, because I love Pesach, but the point is there are times and places to do that. There's all kinds of I know, for example, there are people who who basically only keep kosher on Pesach because they have that certain standard of living anyway, and they go to a Pesach hotel because why not? And then they keep kosher on Pesach, and they're not keeping kosher the rest of the year. So there are it's a case by case basis. I just one has to think that this is the whole time to have a more subtle relationship to physicality and to try and rise above. So try and rise above. But every case is case by case anyway. So that's just something to think about. Okay, top. So that is matzah. So matzah, the idea of building ourselves this independence, and specifically this kind of subtle independence of mind, independence of self-worth, independence from our unhealthy relationships to materialism or other things through ingesting the matzah and having this in mind. So just go through the process right now. Just imagine yourself eating the matzah and thinking about this at the same time even davening a little bit at the same time is like, I want this to make me independent. I want this to make me have that healthier relationship, to rise above to some extent. You're going to wake up a completely different person the next day. So that's that. And finally, for this, at least for the sheet, we have maror. So maror, of course, represents slavery. That is true. Interestingly enough, how it represents slavery, I never really. It seems a little bit of a understatement, like to say, like, oh, it's slavery, maror, like. These people, do you know what these people went through? It was like the Holocaust and worse, right? And you eat a piece of lettuce. Oh, it's so hard.
Like this much left.
Yeah, that's also true. That's also true. But well, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's why people. Yeah, you could think about that. Again, Sephardim doing a little bit better. Anyone who eats soft matzah here? Yeah. Okay. So you're doing a little bit better. Again, it's not because some people.
It's really gross. It's actually not that good.
Yeah, I did try. I tried it once before. Yeah. It seems like such a good idea. But what's the? So where are we at with this? Okay, but maror. So it does represent. But like, come on. How does it really represent slavery? I'll give you another point. Is that you know who were the first people to eat maror? The people who were actually themselves slaves in Egypt. They actually experienced the slavery, and they were the ones who had the first Leila Seder. I said, and to remember slavery, you eat a piece of maror. They still had scars on their backs, from the whole thing. So, like, what is going on with this maror such that it could represent slavery? So this is something the Maharal, I didn't bring it to you here, but Maharal says elsewhere, it's brilliant. It's kind of the flip side of the matzah and the independence. Slavery ultimately means dependence. That's the real idea of slavery is dependence, is to have that unhealthy relationship to something where you're not in control of your actions, but other people are in control of your actions. And that is the one thing which you can say about maror is it does give you a reaction. In as much as you're eating something, especially the horseradish thing, but it's meant to be with the lettuce as well, if you eat something which makes you react, then already you're passive, already you're a slave. That's what it means to be slave. It means to be reactive. It means to be passive. It means that something else is in control of your actions. So of course the measure of it is different to the slavery in Egypt, but the idea of it is actually spot on. In contrast to matzah, you're in total control. It doesn't give you any, at least in the moment, doesn't give you any kind of particular response that you need to have to the matzah. It's so bland, it's boring. So you are completely in control of your response to the matzah. That's freedom, that's independence. In contrast to that. So with that though, so we have the maror, so we are consuming something which relates to slavery, but look specifically about what we do with that maror. It says, Mishahu echad gamor, yesh bo koach al shnei avachim. So talking about Hashem, and Pesach is really time to clarify our Emunah as well. And we say, if Hashem is really one, that means that He has control over two opposites. So that's the thing that you can't do in life, right? Is that if you can control one thing, you can't really control, the opposite of that thing. Or if you have a relationship to one thing, you usually don't have a relationship to the opposite. So if you are, let's say for example, if you can do something, but usually you can't necessarily do the opposite. So if you're someone who's like very strong, like a big warrior person, you may find it hard to be soft and sensitive when the time comes, and vice versa. Usually those are two different people, right, who do those two different jobs, etc., in life. But if you have Hashem is truly one, which means He's in control of everything. This is one of the places where you see that Hashem's oneness means in control of everything. So then He's in control also of opposites. So that's the biggest example that you can have of omnipotence, of God's all-powerful abilities, is if He can control opposites, or He's in charge of opposites. So He says, "Mibnei shehu kol el hakol," because He encompasses everything. Ulekach. So then, this is what we do. So ulekach ne'echal haPesach al hamatzah umaror. This is the way that we do it: is we eat the Pesach together with the matzah and the maror, all of them together. Hamatzah hu bishvil hacherut. As we said, matzah is representing freedom in the way which we described, and maror hu bishvil hashibud. That maror is representing slavery in the way that we described. Kamo shidbar basamuch vehem shnei davrim avachim. These are two opposite things. They're defined as opposites to each other: slavery, freedom, and yet we put them together. It says shemipnei shehu echad gamor hu hamochitz v'hu harofeh. So since God is one, He is the one who is striking, He is the one who is healing. So the growth point over here, the possible transformational point over here, is how much are we really internalizing, how much are we really living that Hashem is really one in the good and in the bad. So when things are good that are happening to us, so then cool. So Mizmor Toda, so thank you Hashem, and it's going well. Right? But the truth is the bad is also from Hashem. He's in control of all of it. It's all from Hashem. And what's more, the bad is also part of the building of our destiny. And that's why they are going together. And that's the idea that the people who left Egypt, the generation of freedom, because there were several generations before who only experienced the slavery, the generation of freedom, they had to eat the maror because they had to understand, that's what Rav Leuchter says, that they had to understand that the slavery was part of the process of the freedom, that the negative was part of the process of the ultimately positive destiny. And that's something that we can see in life. It comes up in the Shir Shel Yom for today. If anyone does that, it's the Sin Tehillim. If people know Tehillim, they know it better, but it's just not because it's in the davening. But it's like Ashrei Mish Hashem Tiyaserenu or something like that. That happy is one that God does Yisurim to him, makes him suffer, and then teaches him the Torah. So you see that there's something which, if we're really in touch with a deeper sense of reality, with a deeper emunah with Hashem, and an understanding of what's really going on, then we would have a very different reaction when bad things are happening to us. It doesn't say that they're not bad things. Of course they're bad things. That's not what he said. He didn't say it's all the same. He said that Hashem is in charge of both opposites. And so we should know that there are two opposites. And Chazal say you say two different brachot. Right? You say the good, you say Tova Meitiv or Shechianu, and the bad you say Dayana Emet. It's two different brachot. It's not that you're not meant to feel sad. No one said that. In Kohelet, right? There's a time to laugh, there's a time to cry. There's a time to cry. We're not saying don't be sad. We're not saying don't cry. But in the tears, you should realize that this is a step somehow towards an ultimately better future. And how many of us are feeling that in the moment? How many of us are living on that level? There are some people who live on that level. I'll speak for myself. I'm not necessarily living on that level, but we could be. This is something which is attainable, and it's certainly attainable to grow in this, to be more than we were yesterday. That's something which is certainly possible for us. So I think with this, let's conclude. If anyone wants to stay for a 2-minute 4 cups postscripts, we can do such a thing. But I think this is already a lot for today. So the idea is that the Seder is not just time for fun traditions, although it is. So my wife's family, they really go hard with the dress up for Pesach, and they, even to the extent that last year was really weird. It was a few years ago, whenever I was in South Africa, they got this massive Egyptian flag and put it on the wall. So it's good to have traditions. It's good to have traditions, but the Seder is not limited to traditions. It's very good to learn. It's very good to learn something, but the Seder is not limited to learning. The Seder should be an experience. It should be a reality. It should be something which we do not feel the same the next day, and that's something. Even though it sounds like a big ask, it's something which is really accessible. It's really accessible to all of us. You're going to do the mitzvahs of the night. Just add a little bit of kavanah, and you just shot that mitzvah all the way into Shemaim, and it's going to make a massive difference. So with that, please God, may we merit to grow in our unity, our Avas Yisrael. May we merit to grow with our independence of mind, of emotion, relationships to things, materialism, and ultimately to grow in our emunah and our living the reality that both the good and the bad are ultimately steps towards a better future. Okay.
Can we do the 4 cups? You give 2 seconds?
Yeah, I can do. Everyone's welcome to leave if they want to leave. So the 4 cups. So this will be a signpost. This is more so you have something to learn. Firstly, I didn't understand it yet. But you asked me about the four rivers. So this is just a small point. I didn't understand it yet, but the Maharal says that it relates to the 4 rivers, just as the water came in to Gan Eden and from there split out into 4 for the rest of the world, i.e. giving like sustenance and life to the rest of the world. So too the 4 cups on Pesach somehow do that, right? So they each relate to one of them. But the main thing is that everyone knows that the 4 cups relate to the 4 expressions of redemption, right? Lashon Geula. It's okay, right? Let's see if anyone gets it. So what are they again? It's Hodseti. Okay, right, let's see if you can guess. And then Hitzalti, Galti, and Lakachti. And then the 5th one is possibly Veveti, right? Yeah. So let's say 4 for now, but you can think about Veveti. So this really, the idea is there's obviously a lot of ideas in this, but the real thing is everything that we've said, we want to integrate it into ourselves entirely. And we have, indeed, 4 parts of ourselves. We have our nefesh, which is the part of our soul which relates to our physical life. We have our ruach, which is the part of our soul which relates to our emotions. We have our neshama, which is the part of our soul which relates to our mind. And we have our chaya, which is the part of our soul which relates to our ratzon, our will. And the idea basically is that through climbing or through going through the 4 cups, we're climbing the levels of ourself, and we're bringing all this freedom that we talked about, we're bringing it comprehensively, bringing it into all the elements of ourselves. To the extent, so, and that's why, basically, I'd say to you, the ultimate thing was the freedom of the body. That's basically what was going on there, is just that the body should be no longer undergoing hard work. To the extent that, and all the way up at the top, you get lakachti, which is your unity with Hashem. Basically, that's that relationship with Hashem. That's the highest thing that we can have, and that's the part of us which is going to correspond over here. So, that's the thought. And now, what you need to do basically is go through when you find there are other reasons given for the 4 cups, right? And there are also 4 olamot, which are good. So you've still got a lot of work to do for Seder night to see what can be the connections between the 4 parts of ourselves and those 4 mitzvahs and those 4 olamot, etc., etc. And with this, it's just quite fun because you see number 4 is like the most prevalent number on Pesach, right? It's everywhere. Mm-hmm. So you have the 4 cups, you have the 4, if you want, you can say the 4 expressions of redemption, you have the 4 questions. According to Rabbi Manning, there's 4 sections of the Haggadah. You'll see that tomorrow, I think, etc., etc. So there's 4s everywhere. But now we have a little bit of a taste of why everything's 4, because there's 4 parts of you, and that's what we're trying to do. So that's a food for thought for Seder night. Yeah, shkach.
A whole shiur in like
Yeah, that's what.
that's wild.
Yeah.
As soon as you started saying that, first I was like, I knew that was.
Yeah, that's it.
Like,
yeah.
Somehow it just comes up everywhere.
Yeah.